Pleasure to introduce Francis to you, who will take you through today's topic, attracting and retaining employees.
Good morning, everyone. I think it's kind of customary for when someone's doing a session like this to, I suppose, for them to justify why they are in a position to actually talk on this topic. As you can see, I have over 20 years experience of employment law and HR related issues gained in both private and public organizations. You would see that my background is specifically employment law. However, more recently, my area has been in that of consultancy. And that I am undertaking that role working for Morpay, and I have been in that position for approximately 3 years. Now, in terms of today's agenda, what we hope you will get from today's agenda is how employees turnover can affect productivity and performance. Best practice that you can adopt in hiring and processing and indeed onboarding employees, what recruitment and retention initiatives as an organization for you to consider, measuring employees' satisfaction levels. Hopefully that will then lead to you retaining staff, and the benefits of understanding the reasons behind why employees may leave businesses. Now, I'm sure you will agree that employees are key to an organization's success. Without having, I suppose, a quality workforce, the chances are that as a business, it would affect your productivity and indeed your profitability. Now, some of the consequences of a high turnover of employees, I think it probably goes without saying. We've listed them there, but I'll just kind of go through them one by one and just touch a summary of their meaning or what they entailed. Certainly reputational damage. Prospective employees could be put off if there's a quick succession of turnover of employees from the business itself. Certainly from your own pocket, if you're having to regularly advertise and indeed interview staff, that's going to affect your pocket and your cash flow. Loss of time kind of associated with the above. The time associated with onboarding new employees, again, is a waste to the business. Reduce productivity. Generally speaking, the business performance is likely to be negatively impacted. Employee turnover is likely to lead to a loss of experience and a loss of staff who are familiar with the business's policy and goals. And obviously the risk of legal disputes. Staff leaving likely, some of them indeed may take the business to an employment tribunal, to which there's a cost implication in the effect where they're likely to succeed against the business. So I think the consequences where there is a high turnover, I think from what I have just gone through, and as you can see, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. And we try to avoid using BREXIT in this process, but I think it's unavoidable. We do not know where we're going with BREXIT and don't want to get political, neither do our politicians. But in the recent survey by the CIPD, what there seems to be saying is that there's likely to be an impact in terms of staff and the recruitment of staff as a result of Brexit. So certainly, if you look at the second bullet point there, it is noted that 44% of employers experienced greater difficulty in recruitment during last year. And with the present uncertainty, that is likely to continue. Now, in terms of attracting and retaining staff, it goes back in many ways to the beginning in the recruitment and selection process. As a business, as an organization, you must have in mind what you need from the individuals in order to do the role that you have advertised for. And as you can see from the slide there, it's a two-way process. Yeah, the individual has got knowledge, hopefully capability, attitude and skills that you require in that particular role. And where that person has got the, I suppose, the criteria that you've requested or you require for the role, then it's whether you've got to also consider whether the person is suitable or is likely to fit into the organization itself in terms of the role. So the danger may well be that, look, we've got someone, he or she has got what we need, and that's good, but is that person right for the organization? Is that person right for the role that you have indeed advertised and you want to fill? Assuming you're both in agreement, employer, prospective employee, then it's a case of moving on to the next stage or possibly making an offer. But we mention this because getting it right at the beginning hopefully would mean that you will not have to actually halfway through during the person's probationary period or indeed thereafter, you will not have to end that relationship and recruit again. Moving on. Now, there are indeed a number of challenges in the recruitment process. The market itself, the candidate-driven market, or whether it's a candidate-driven market, as it appears to currently be, whether there's a talent shortage, skills deficit, indeed attracting talent, location, discrimination. I'm going to skip some of these as discrimination, retention, and economic growth. And I've already mentioned the dreaded B word. Now, candidates who are, I suppose, satisfied with their experience are likely, so at the recruitment stage, if they're satisfied with how things has gone and an offer is made, well, they're likely to accept the position. They're likely, again, to apply again if they're unsuccessful, and or they're likely to recommend the hiring organization to others, regardless of whether they were successful or not. And who knows, in the near future, they might indeed become a customer of the hiring organization, potentially your business. I think throughout, I'm going to mention, going back to the beginning, the recruitment process. And we start again from the beginning in relation to the role that is advertised. Clarity is key, or indeed very important. If the role is clearly defined, then that's helpful. that is likely to lead to candidates being, I suppose, attracted to the role. Consider the assessment and indeed the selection of the applications. Again, give consideration to appointing the right person, and indeed we will come on to this later on, but indeed onboarding, or indeed having an induction of that person into the role, or indeed the culture of the organization. I think one thing that one has got to be careful about, again, in the recruitment process is that of diversity and discrimination. One has got to be mindful that in the early stages that discrimination does not occur on any of the grounds you can see on this slide. There is a tendency that sometimes discrimination can occur inadvertently. Unfortunately, it's not a defence in law, and so care must indeed be taken. Again, assuming you advertise the position, care indeed must be taken in terms of keeping that employee or potential employee well informed, providing them with the job-related information. So an information pack you might want to consider sending out to them, or indeed that may be clearly expressed in the job advertisement, but often the job advertisement is a summary of what you as an organization requires. The processing of the recruitment stage, and indeed which includes the application stage, must be easily done, and indeed it must be done in a timely manner. From research, it has indicated that 78% of candidates says that their overall experience of an organisation is valued by these things, the 4 bullet points. Treat all candidates well, the transparency, act effectively, and indeed communication. I hope we're not teaching you as like children, but in terms of communication, do bear in mind the 3 C's as we've got there. Clearly and accurately describe the company and the position. Be consistent in terms of the scheduled responses and any follow-up within the time set, and have a personal touch or a caring touch in terms of the process itself. In terms of, we've got here the generation differences, and I think we've got here Generation Z, Millenniums, and indeed Generation X, Baby Boomers, and so on. Now, we've listed this because in terms of, if you look at the slides, Generation Z, in terms of being communicated with, they do not have or see an issue with Texas. Whereas if you look across to Generation X, or indeed the Baby Boomers, Texas comes as 3rd on the list. In relation to Millenniums, 2nd place by way of communication, telephone seems to be a means in which they do not have too much of an issue with. Whereas if you look at the Generation Z, well, that's 3rd on their list. So again, one of the reasons we've put this slide is for here, so you to consider the person or people applying for the position, and when a decision having to be made, how you communicate with them. So if you have a Generation X person communicating the outcome by way of X, they might not see that as an organization, may not see your organization as an organization that they want to work for. Whereas with a Generation Z, that's clearly acceptable. Again, in terms of attracting staff, we suggest that you research the current job market. What are the competition offering, the location, career development opportunities, what will employees get from working for you, and talk to your best existing employees about what attracted them to the role. I think that is particularly key as well, because often you can get information from your existing staff, as well as obviously carrying out some external research. We've taken a quote here from Reed, where it says, in relation to the person specification, we've taken a quote from that particular organization, and it's, as you can see, it says there that many companies rely solely on a job specification, focusing on the job and not the person. Sorry, not the person with talent, more sought after than ever. The more people-focused businesses are doing just that, focusing on the person or people as opposed to the job itself. And as a result of focusing on the person, we're considering this profile the ideal person, enable the applicants to assess themselves, and provide a benchmark for judging achievements. Again, the Glassdoor survey says that the most important, or it lists the most important factors that candidates look for. 62%, as you can see, look for transparency. 61% location. 49% commute time. And 48% benefits, with 31% employee reviews. Now, in terms of where you advertise, give consideration to, I suppose, the type of group of people you're trying to attract. So, online job site. Some examples are given there. That's got about 52%. 35% organizations careers website. 32% word of mouth from friend. Recruiters or hiring managers. And 24%, beg your pardon, recruitment agency. And in terms of what matters most to the candidates, well, you can see that 48% an easy, convenient communication, which I think we referred to earlier. 47% joining a company that encourages good work-life balance. 35% high salary and attractive benefits and perks. The culture of the organization, whether financially, how the company performed financially, and 24% familiarity with the brand. Okay. In terms of the brand itself and familiarity, consideration must be given to the kind of relationships or interactions that they have or previously had with the brand itself. So at 30%, 37% had friends or family working there. I'm going to skip some of these. 24% were already a customer. 50% had a positive impression on the brand itself. I think I'm trying to recall when I last looked at a job advertisement, but I said not often that organizations themselves actually, in some ways, blow their own trumpet. Going back to what I said earlier, they tend to focus on the job role itself, as opposed to one, the person that they're trying to attract, and two, as an organization, what the organization itself has achieved. This is a quote taken from Adidas, and it defines 6 beliefs and qualities that they want people to feel and experience, and that which differentiates them from their competitors, such as Nike. And what they have stressed is that collaborating with those that inspire them, which they explain, means opening doors to collaborators from all walks of life, opening their ears to their points of views, and being generous with their own insight and experience, so that they can all co-create the future together. Now, for a large organization like that, indeed, they might indeed have time and resources in which to do that, but whether large or small, some time or indeed consideration ought to be given to taking some of these on board. One of the key, increasingly, work-life balance is becoming attractive to employees and staff alike. And Deloitte Millennium Survey, this is in relation to full-time colleagues. It goes on to say that 2/3 of the respondents stated that their employers are presenting flexibility in one of the following forms. Flexi time. I think it gives employees some degree of choice in when they work. Flexi recruitment. Employer presents diverse employment terms or indeed arrangement. Flexi role. Employee has some control over their job composition. And indeed, flexi location. Employer offers work from office, home, or other location. Again, I think given if it's a factory establishment where there's an assembly line, working from home will not be something that could be offered. But where the job does not obviously require that, maybe consideration could be given. And what inspires applicants? 53% the company website. We've got LinkedIn coming second place. In the fourth place, we've got contacts at the organisation. Kind of surprised actually that that is the case, but I thought that would have come quite higher. And then we've got 14% at HR department, and then jointly with 12%, we've got headhunting, Facebook, and Glassdoor. In terms of the website, company website, or indeed its portal, the information on there should be clear in relation to your culture, your mission statement, and your values, team members, biographies, photos and videos. An example, a day in the life of, career selection, and indeed a simple application process, as we discussed earlier. Social media, we're all familiar with it. Most of us are familiar with it, not to exclude anyone, but this is increasingly an important means of getting the message across in relation to your organisation, the type of person that you want within the organisation. 49% of candidates follow companies on social media, and 94% of candidates says they visit a company's social website when searching for jobs. Within the social recruiting, do create the content, or ensure that the contents show off how strong the company culture is, which I touched on earlier. Focus your efforts where candidates are most likely to go. Again, think of the audience. Publish, share, like and comment on content to build and engage your network. Consider proactively approaching candidates. Candidates do want lots of information, but although they want lots of information, do keep it simple in terms of the job details. The salary must be clear, an overview of the company, why person fit or likely to fit within the organisation, job title, and indeed the company mission statement or mission itself. I think in terms of employees referral, it says, as you can see, 32% of companies do say that employees do use their referral scheme to attract staff. 70% of referred employees have not changed jobs since being hired. So again, we mentioned earlier, word of mouth by way of attracting staff. This seems to be supporting that or confirming that particular approach, that if existing employees refer potential staff to the organisation, they're likely to stay much longer within the organisation. 56% of referred employees have been in their current position for about 5 years or more. At the interviewing process, I think what has been the common approach is that employees tend to look for 3 things in particular. Conversation with the leadership team, which is about 40%. Prompt follow-up, again 40%, and a sense of how they perform at 36%. We'll touch on feedback shortly, but certainly a sense of how they perform will indeed come under the brackets of feedback to the successful candidate as well as those who were not successful. In terms of the information to be provided to the candidates, information about the role itself and their responsibility, how they fit with the team or within the team. I've already mentioned the company statement and indeed its vision, salary and benefits being key. Certainly promotion or indeed advancement within the role is something, again, as an organisation that you may want to consider. Certainly at the interviewing process or the interviewing stage, in order to give the employee the opportunity, I suppose, to make themselves comfortable or feel relaxed within the process, we are suggesting that you ask the candidate to recall a past experience and describe how they handled it. In terms of the next point, what we refer to as situational questions, present the candidate with a hypothetical situation and indeed ask them how they would handle it. And in relation to competency-based questions, indeed you may require the candidate to give a specific example of a time in which they demonstrated that particular skill that you are indeed asking for or require within the role itself. In terms of the scoring of the candidates, certainly we are saying that they should be scored on these main three areas. How they perform in the interview, I would have thought is kind of key. The evidence they provided against the selection criteria, and certainly do not do this. Do not consider them on how they perform against each other. Once the interviewing process has been completed, naturally there'll be a period of reflection on the candidates, and having reflected, an offer should be made to the person, the right person that you've considered fulfilled the criteria and indeed likely to play a key role in the organisation. Naturally, explain the salary and the intrinsic motivators within the organisation. Earlier we mentioned feedback. Positive feedback should be given to the candidate. I suppose there's two schools of thought on this. Whether you provide feedback without being requested, some say that you should. Other school of thought is that following a request, then yes, certainly that should be provided. If not, you're possibly opening up yourself to maybe a future tribunal claim. But along the lines of discrimination, so I would provide the feedback if requested. It may be in the job advertisement itself. You might say, you know, we tend to get lots of applications, and therefore, if we haven't contacted you, you might indeed. We will not contact you. We will not contact you. So you're making it clear from the onset what your position is as a business, as an organisation. But certainly where feedback has been asked for, then we will indeed suggest that you do provide that feedback. In terms of developmental feedback, let the candidate know about opportunities to improve their knowledge, skills, or behaviour. Who knows, if they're narrowly missed out, they could indeed be a future candidate for any position within the organisation. And I suppose the key to this is onboarding the candidate within the organisation. On day one, or even before day one, you would have provided them with information about attending day one. So do provide them with information on training, job, their duties, company policies, and indeed possibly key the culture of the organisation. Introduce new employees to team members or indeed managers and co-colleagues, indeed outside of the team. Designate a mentor or a buddy to whom a new employee can take questions. Set clear expectation for day-to-day responsibilities and performance matrix. Again, one of the things about maintaining staff is performance matrix or indeed appraisals. At that stage, you'll find out how well they're fitting into the organisation and what some of the issues are that maybe you can indeed correct and generate or create a happy colleague working environment. And indeed, educate new staff on what benefits are available for them within the business or indeed organisation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Francis. We'll now move on to the Q&A session, so please continue to drop any questions that you do have into the question box. We've already received a number of questions through, so I will start with the first question, which is from John. John has asked, lots of my staff are leaving and going to work for a nearby competitor. What can I do to try and prevent this from happening?
Yeah, I think earlier we said in the slide discussion that approaching colleagues, I mean, first and foremost, you try to find out, you carry out some research yourself as to what is indeed attracting colleagues or former colleagues to that competitor. But one of the ways of indeed getting that information is that you will have existing staff members who have got friends that's gone to the competitor. I see no reason why you cannot actually approach that colleague and say, well, look, your friend has gone over. What is it he has or she has said that has indeed attracted them to go to the other side? Indeed, carrying out your own investigation, your own research, as to why, what is it they're offering. It might be slightly better pay, it might be pay isn't always a reason, it might be performance issues in terms of who they're being line managed by, and they may not have had the confidence to approach you. Hopefully your policy on grievance and grievance policy would indeed give them the confidence to raise any issues within the organisation. But if that's something that has caused them to move to your competitors, you may indeed want to actually approach the person that they've named as the reason or cause for them leaving. I'm not saying that you actually get rid of that person, but certainly you've tried to find out so it doesn't happen again and so you don't lose staff.
Great, thank you, Francis. Next question is from Fiona. She's asked, what can I do to retain employees other than giving them a pay rise? I
think often, I suppose we tend to see pay as a means of keeping someone, and yeah, in some ways that helps. But if you can continue to increase the pay of someone, and if they're unhappy, that's not going to solve the problem. So you may indeed want to consider flexible working. Well, first and foremost, meet with the person and find out what, as a business or as a manager, you can do to actually generate that work-life balance. It may well be that gym membership, not saying that you pay for it, but if there's a local gym nearby, you may indeed want to approach the owners, managers there and say, look, if we can attract or get 5 of our employees joining you, would you give them a discount? I know 1 or 2 organizations do that, so that's something that you may want to consider. I already mentioned flexible working in terms of, again, that work-life balance. Yeah, I think those are a couple of examples that you may consider as a business.
Great, thank you, Francis. We've now got another question, which is from Catherine. Catherine has asked, she said, I'm currently recruiting for a role. 2 individuals of different ethnicities have been shortlisted. Both do have equal capability. Which one should I select?
Well, I think I read from the question, you're interviewing for the role, presumably, I think as you've highlighted, both of them, their CV or application form reflects equal experience, skills, ability. In terms of the selection, my view is select both of them for an interview. And depending on how they perform at the interview stage, then that will determine whether which one you go with. I think sometimes a CV application form, they're quite glowing, they're quite positive, but on the day itself, that person may not indeed, I suppose, meet or reflect what they've stated in their CV or indeed the job application. So yes, interview both, shortlist both for interviewing, but on the day itself, let's see how they perform at the interview, and that will give you an indication on which one indeed to select.
Brilliant, thank you, Francis. We'll have to close off the questions there. If your question hasn't been answered, we'll contact you after the webinar. And just to remind you, we will be circulating a recording of the webinar and also a copy of the slides. In relation to attracting and retaining employees, we're running a live product demo of our employee benefits offering on Thursday, the 23rd of May at 10 AM. You can register for this in the resources section of our website under webinars if you're interested in finding out more about the employee benefits that are available. In terms of connecting with MorePay, there's a whole host of additional content on the MorePay website, which includes bi-monthly employment law legislation guides, and they're also located in the resources section of our website. If you follow us on any of our social sites, we'll publish all our new blogs and guides on there, so you'll see them flash up on your newsfeed. I do hope you found the webinar useful. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Francis for hosting the webinar and for answering your questions. We'll close the webinar now. Hope you have a lovely day, and we'll follow up with the slides and recording as soon as they're available. Thank you very much.